Hello class, so today we're going to be talking about Mrs. Hyatt's solution to a problem in a local elementary school. Okay, so our problem is that Ms. Pickards needs to find a way to teach science at a low-income school with minimal budgeting for science curriculum in elementary. Okay, her students are second graders, meaning most of them are 7 to 8 years old. The age will play a factor in what I've decided to include in this technology session. So the curriculum for second grade science states that students should be able to analyze and interpret data patterns and what they believe in real life and what they mean in real life scenarios. Students will perform science experiments online and brainstorm with their peers about the patterns present in the data they collected through the online experiment. Okay, so the first technology that I have decided to use is this online lab about natural selection. So with this, I would create a PowerPoint that describes and teaches the students about natural selection before we do this lab. While I am presenting about natural selection, I will go ahead and answer any questions that they have. Before or after that, though, I will explain the lab by itself so that students can kind of get an understanding of what we're going to do before we do it, because technology can be very challenging for young students who haven't used it before. So this will probably be new, especially for second graders. So I'll explain to them how to use it and what to do for this. So you can see here that there are rabbits, right? So you see that there are white rabbits, there are brown rabbits, and there are rabbits with floppy ears. So over here you have fur, ears, and teeth, and those are the mutations that the rabbits will experience through this lab. So students will be looking for the differences in the population as time goes on. So you can see that there's population and generation on this graph right here. Now, I wouldn't expect my students to understand those things quite yet, just because this is their first lab for natural selection, but you can see that it'll be a good introduction. And also it'll make good questions. So they'll probably ask about this graph because I won't talk about it. So they'll probably ask about it, and then we can have a good conversation. And then that'll also help their learning in the future. Okay. So the next technology that I chose was actually a virtual tour of the Museum of Washington, D.C. So the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So I thought that this would be really fun if we were talking about airplanes and space travel, things like that, because it's also something that students will be interested in. So even if this isn't a lesson that students need to have based on curriculum, this is something that we could get them interested in what we're going to talk about with. So like if we're talking about planets or we're talking about stars, I could use this as an introduction to help students be open to the idea of what we're doing. Okay, the next technology that I have is this video about the water cycle. So I thought that this would be great for students because it's about the water cycle, that's something that they're gonna have to use. It's something that is in their curriculum. Okay, so for assessment, first, for the first one, for all of these actually, I'm gonna ask my students questions as we follow along in the lab or in the video or in the virtual lab tour. So asking questions during class helps them to think presently and think about what they're learning. It pulls them back into the situation. And then number two, I'll play interactive quizzing games with my students such as Kahoot. So second graders love technology. They love being online. So having them get out their Chromebooks and asking them to play a game with me on the Chromebook would be super beneficial for them and for me because I get to see what they've learned. So I'll have my students write out potential test questions from the lab and they'll answer them aloud in class. So I feel like this is a great test prep question, I guess. So what they'll do is they'll write out any questions that they feel they could answer in a test, right? So like for the lab about natural selection, if they truly understood it, they could say, why are these rabbits developing different mutations? So that could be a test question, like why do animals have mutations? And that would be survival. And they would have to brainstorm that aloud and think together. And so by them coming up with these test questions together, I'm able to understand what they've understood and what they've taken from the lab. And also it gives me ideas for questions to actually put on their tests whenever we finish certain units. But yeah, this is my technology rich lesson with my students. And this is to solve Mrs. Pickard's problem of not a lot of technology in a low income school, and she needs to teach science. So all of these technologies are